Hello friends, welcome back to the channel. It's been a while. In this video, I'm going to explain modern Orthodox Judaism. This is the last of the four sects that I personally have identified as being the four sects of Orthodox Judaism in America, being traditional, yeshivish, chassidish, and modern. In this video, I plan to explain some of the core values of modern Orthodoxy, a bit of the history, some of the culture, its pros and cons, and how it's practiced and manifested, and then finally contrasting it with the other sects. Before I crack into this video, I wanted to explain that this is all my opinion. I'm basing this on my lived experience growing up as an Orthodox Jew here in New York and having exposure to all of these communities. Finally, the reason I'm making this video is ultimately to spread a sense of understanding, a sense of awareness and connection amongst these communities and amongst people in general. Because I feel like spreading this information and sharing what different communities are like and what they value, ultimately, honestly helps us see how much more similar we are than different. So first of all, some of the core beliefs to understand within modern Orthodoxy, one of which is Torah Umada. And this kind of gets to the heart of it, because what modern Orthodoxy is a full embrace of Western values and culture while not compromising Jewish values. And that's literally what it boils down to. Modern being kind of secular, and more specifically, honestly, Western culture, and Orthodox being Orthodox Jewish. The idea behind it is an observance of Torah law fully, plus this embrace of living fully within secular culture. And Torah Umada means Torah is referring to God's Torah, and Umada referring to the mundane. So the mundane kind of being the secular world. What that means is that modern Orthodox people put a very high premium on getting a good education, for one, being a functioning and productive member of society. So having a good job, right? A good job can mean any type of job. Typically speaking, though, there is a premium on getting a higher level education and doing something that is specialized. So becoming a doctor, becoming a lawyer, engineer, and it could even mean doing something in trade school. The idea is that it's important to work and be productive. Another value within modern Orthodox Jewish communities is Zionism. Zionism is very often seen as a core part of modern Orthodox life. This might be primarily due to Rav Kook, a big Zionist, who was one of the fathers of the modern Orthodox movement. In the late 1800s, early 1900s, modern Orthodoxy was created in America as a movement to get away from the ghetto kind of lifestyle that was seen typically in European society. This was a movement created by leaders in a community reacting to the challenges of America and Western life. And they have created this idea of let's embrace secular life with Torah values. Now, obviously, this idea would be considered heresy if not for the fact that there are places within the Talmud, Torah, and Mishnah, meaning they were able to leverage certain aspects of the Jewish literature in order to justify and therefore really promote this way of living and being. Because up until that point, it was very common for Jews, especially in Europe, to be segregated and not be involved in the culture. The modern Orthodox movement was there to solve that problem and create more coherency between Jewish values and Western culture. And ultimately, it was incredibly successful. YU was eventually developed, Yeshiva University, a very big and popular university amongst Orthodox Jews. Those that are seeking to get a degree will often go there. It's like the modern Orthodox Hogwarts, you could say. It's almost like a rite of passage. As I was mentioning earlier, one of the ideas that these rabbis and leaders were able to leverage is this idea of Torah Im Derech Eretz, which is a well-known Mishnah in Pirkei Avos, which is the Tractate of the Fathers, I believe is how it translates into English. But basically, the idea being that you can't have Torah without bread, right? There are many ways to translate it. You can't have Torah without manners. You can't have Torah without a job. One of the ways that it's been used heavily is like, hey, you need to learn God's Torah. You need to be a religious Jew, but you need to be able to do that with having a living, with being a productive member of society. And obviously, like any movement, there is going to be some pushback. The chassidish movement also was not embraced with open arms. For many years, Hasidus was considered anti-religious until eventually it became mainstream and accepted among non-chassidish people to be considered perfectly religious and a good thing for people to do. Like maybe people that are not chassidish are like, sure, we're not chassidish, but that's what they are, and we accept that that's still valid Judaism. So modern Orthodoxy also did have to take a stand. And honestly, amongst certain more religious groups, they might consider modern Orthodoxy less religious. when in reality, many modern Orthodox people, and obviously there's a fluctuation, there's a range. And today, when I get into the cultural aspect, I'll explain a little bit more of the range. But obviously, there are people that are modern Orthodox that are massive, massive Torah scholars that will, let's say, study Talmud like a page a day. And they might be masters in it by any stretch of the imagination. They might be very well regarded scholars in their own right, albeit different from yeshivish or other types of scholars. Now, talking about the community and how modern Orthodoxy manifests, breaking into the observance aspect first, I don't exactly know how this happens. Probably, people will say, well, modern Orthodoxy, as soon as you start embracing secular values, you start assimilating and adopting some of those values, and they take precedence over Torah values, which might be true. But the idea is that you have people that are extraordinarily religious that don't compromise on any values, up until probably what some might imagine would be conservative, in the sense that it looks Jewish, but it's not exactly observant, right? So it's a big range of how people observe within the modern Orthodox communities. And each community is going to be different too. Now, obviously, when you're talking about a culture that is embracing Western values and then they will conglomerate in a suburb, you're going to have typical suburban life and typical suburban challenges, such as your kids wanting certain brands or keeping up with the Joneses, and that kind of mentality of suburban type of life. Everything that you could imagine a suburban type of life, just Jewish flavored. So that's interesting. That's one of the ways it plays out. Other ways it plays out is most people will try to get a higher level of education, and also Zionism, depending on the community, being a big aspect. Many modern Orthodox people have aspirations to move to Israel eventually, if they're not already planning on doing it. So that's a brief cultural synopsis. But then, as far as dating, modern Orthodox communities are typically a little more open. Many of them will use the shidduch system or a type of shidduch system, i.e. using resumes, a shotgun, and people setting you up. But there are also online platforms for many modern Orthodox people, singles events, and meeting a person in college or high school even, and connecting through that. So dating seems to be, from my understanding, a lot more smooth and easy. And obviously that comes with its own challenges too, don't get me wrong. But in my personal opinion, I prefer it over to the yeshivish, very strict shidduch dating system only. And finally, contrasting modern Orthodoxy to the other Orthodox communities. So first, what is the difference between traditional Judaism and modern Orthodoxy? Here's the bottom line. Modern Orthodoxy is a movement, right? It is a philosophy. It's not just, this is how my father was and this is how I am. Now, maybe many people might be traditional about modern Orthodoxy in the sense that they're not thinking about it so deeply. It's just the community they grew up and were raised in. The bottom line is that that's the major difference. Traditional people are experiential. Traditional people have a connection to the traditions and to what it means to keep Shabbat and kosher. It's experienced. It's not so philosophical. As opposed to modern Orthodoxy, it's a philosophy. We're embracing and growing in our Torah values, plus embracing secular values. Now, a perfect place that this will play out, just to contrast what modern Orthodoxy might believe, is fundamentalist beliefs in the Genesis story. A modern Orthodox person might be very comfortable saying that the entire Genesis story is an allegory and is not actually literal. Now, to a yeshivish person, that is heresy. Like, of course, God created the world in 7 days and created Adam and whatever. Maybe some people might flirt with the idea, yeah, maybe it's an allegory, whatever. Typically, a yeshivish person will look at it fundamentally. They will look at it like the Torah is true and the Genesis story is absolutely how it happened. A modern Orthodox person will be comfortable saying that that's not how it happened. Now, watch this clip of Rabbi Jonathan Sacks debating Richard Dawkins, where he makes this point.
What about Adam and Eve? I mean, what do you think about that? Is that symbolic or literal?
Well, Adam and Eve is clearly a parable because there was no first human, and there may have been a mitochondrial Eve, but I mean, that was somewhere else and in another country.
Adam,
and besides, the wench is dead. Exactly so. So, no, I mean, Adam and Eve are really, I mean, if you trace it back 6,000 years ago, obviously the Bible is telling us the story about the first dawn of civilization. I mean, there was art 25,000 years before
Adam
that.
and Eve is symbolic.
Yeah.
But the parting of the Red Sea, I mean, how do you decide which bits are symbolic?
Very simple. The rabbis in the 10th century laid down the following principle. If a biblical narrative is incompatible with established scientific fact, it is not to be read literally. And that was 8 centuries before the word scientist was coined. So they weren't just doing it to please Richard
Many
Dawkins. They
people
were
do
doing it
believe it
for
literally.
their own intellectual integrity.
Meanwhile, if you ask a traditional person about the Genesis story, they might be able to tell you the story. They might be able to say, yeah, whatever, there's some meaning there. It's maybe a tale. They might be fundamental about it. Like, yeah, I think that's how the world was created. And they might also just be like, oh, whatever. Yeah, maybe it's an allegory, or obviously the Big Bang Theory is true, or obviously evolution is true. And they will respect the story for what it is, and they will respect the science for what it is. Now, that is how a traditional person might look at it. And obviously that's a big fluctuation. How a chassidish person might look at it, they might say, yeah, it's an allegory, but they'll go into a deep Kabbalistic idea. If they're willing to entertain the idea that it's an allegory, they might have some type of deep spiritual meaning behind it. And other Hasidic people will obviously be fundamentalists about it too. So in conclusion, modern Orthodoxy is an incredible community. It's an incredible culture. And philosophically, like I said, it's this joining of secular values without compromising any Jewish values. That's the idea behind modern Orthodoxy. One final point, I think you have a lot of traditional people that might end up saying that they are modern, when in reality they don't necessarily identify with those core philosophies of modern Orthodoxy. Now, obviously, I'm not like the police, and these are just labels. Use them if they feel relevant to you, and don't use them if they don't. But yeah, just being more chilled out and relaxed about observancy does not make you modern Orthodox. I mean, it could if that's how you define it for sure, but the way I see it is that it's very different. Please share your feedback. Let me know what you think of this video. If I did it justice or not, let me know your thoughts. I tried to respond to every comment, so definitely let me know what you think. This video took me so long to make. This video was such a stumbling block for me. For some reason, I just had the hardest time wanting to set up the camera and sit in front of it and finally film this video. It's been a long time in the making. What I have left in this series is I'm going to contrast the religious communities in America to the religious communities in Israel. Then I have one final exposing the shidduch system video, because I've gotten married, and actually since then I've even had a baby, which is incredible. She's turning 1 in like a week from recording. So it's been kind of a magical ride. So I have a shidduch system video, and then I will end off the series with a Q&A. So guys, make sure you leave your questions in the comments, whatever questions you have. You can check out the other videos in the series. And also, guys, check out the Gabi kind of podcast. It's my podcast. It's available on this YouTube channel. You could start with a fantastic episode that I did with Dr. Justin Sledge, one of my favorite episodes. Or you can check out the one that I did with Sarah Baruchov or Trevor Aronson. And any of the episodes that I did, they were all magnificent, and I wouldn't put them out if I weren't really proud of them. So check it out, and definitely share your feedback. Subscribe. See you guys. Take care.